Up going coast to coast. We're going to start in Orlando. Paolo Banchero agreed to a 5-year, $239 million max rookie contract extension. That number will be even higher if he makes All NBA next season. So, Brian, what should we know about this deal?
Well, this is a huge move for the #1 overall pick from a couple years ago. A great move for the Magic, who lock in their core. If you look at Franz Wagner and Jalen Suggs. The interesting thing about this, Malika, is that he got a player option in the 5th year. That had become almost extinct over the last 3 or 4 seasons. After last decade, we saw a number of players who got that player option. Guys like Donovan Mitchell, Paul George, Kyrie Irving didn't stay with their teams.
That's certainly something to keep an eye on. Let's head to Indiana. Tyrese Halliburton recovering from the Achilles tear he suffered in the NBA Finals, but this is good to see. He made it to a Fever game on Saturday. Now, Pacers president Kevin Pritchard, he confirmed Tyrese will not play next season. So how is his team positioned, Monica, come his return in 2026?
Well, I know we're talking 2026, but I'm still not counting him completely out for 2025. But in 2026, I think you look at this roster, you look at a guy like Jarris Walker, you look at a guy like Thomas Bryant. Yeah. Obviously, if Tyrese Halliburton can come back and duplicate the success this past season, but here's the thing, this team is going to play with speed. With or without him, they will only be better at playing with if he is not available by 2026, but they'll be great once he returns.
Chris Paul is a free agent. He told Jamel Hill how much longer he intends to play.
At the most, a year. I just finished my 20th season, which is a blessing in itself.
All right, so at the most a year, that means, do you believe this is it? Is that what he's saying?
I think this is it, and I think he will find a home. It's going to come, later than other free agents here. But last week on this show, I thought the Phoenix Suns would be the most likely landing place for him. I'm going to expand that or maybe amend it and say, I think the Los Angeles Clippers make a lot of sense for him now. Now that they've traded Norman Powell, they need an extra reinforcement in the backcourt. And Bradley Beal's out there, but why not have both?
Bradley Beal and Chris Paul. All right, we'll definitely be keeping an eye on the Clippers. Elsewhere in Los Angeles, the Lakers added a much-needed big, DeAndre Ayton. He cleared waivers, signed a 2-year deal. Ayton is expected to speak to reporters for the first time as a member of the Lakers this afternoon. But in a statement released by Lakers PR, Rob Pelinka, he said, quote, DeAndre's size, his mobility, athleticism will both allow paint scoring and paint protection. DeAndre's playoff experience as a starter on an NBA Finals team will also align with our ultimate Lakers championship aspirations. So again, we're going to be hearing from DeAndre Ayton a little bit later this afternoon. But Brian, how do you feel about his fit, just looking at this current Lakers roster?
Well, the Lakers needed a center. They had $8 million to play with. That was their limitation. And they get a guy in his prime who has put up terrific numbers, who is going to be highly motivated. The contract he signed has an out after this year, which means that we're going to see potentially a DeAndre Ayton that we haven't seen in a while. He signed that contract with the Suns. He was salty from the moment that he signed it because he had to go get an offer sheet from the Pacers, and he just wasn't the same player over the last few years. All you can ask for from the Lakers, when the situation they were in, was to get a motivated, high-production player at that price. They did. Is he a perfect player? Of course not. He wouldn't have been bought out if he was a perfect player. But the Lakers are in a situation of need. DeAndre Ayton is in a situation of need. We'll have to see how they work together.
It feels like Luka Doncic's opinion here, Ramona, may be the most important, particularly because we have seen Luka thrive when he has a rim-running big. I'm not sure I necessarily describe DeAndre Ayton that way. However, he was a part of maybe the most famous alley-oop of the last couple of years, the Valley-oop, right?
Over there, yeah.
And so Luka is looking for a partner, a tandem. Can DeAndre Ayton be that? I guess he has to be.
He's right now he is. Yeah. I don't know if this is the long-term partnership, but he has the opportunity. And obviously, Luka was consulted on this. They have the same representation in Bill Duffy's agency and Neiman Namakian, and there's a synergy there, right? They checked in with Luka. Obviously, he was for this move, and so that's all you need to know here. Like, if Luka's on board, then that's what they got. And I don't know if this is going to be the long-term fit for the Lakers, but this is a make-good contract. And DeAndre Ayton had a lot of success. He was a starting center on that Phoenix Suns team that made the finals, and that was when he had Chris Paul in his ear, when he had Devin Booker in his other ear, and he was in a very structured environment with Monty Williams as the head coach. Well, Luka's on one ear, LeBron's on the other ear, JJ Redick will be in his ear. I think this is a good environment for him to succeed, and on that make-good kind of contract.
I think you're right in all the
You don't sound as convinced.
Well, we have talked ad nauseum, and I often have disagreed with the way that Luka has been discussed in terms of needing to turn over the leaf as far as his conditioning and taking it to the next level. DeAndre Ayton's got to be able to respond here. But here's what I think is beautiful about this for him. He doesn't even necessarily have to be the same version of himself that he was in Phoenix, right? Luka threw 50 lobs last year. That's 7th in the league in terms of total. That's easy. Yeah. DeAndre Ayton is a bona fide NBA player. He can catch the ball, he can finish at the rim, right? He doesn't even necessarily have to go back or turn the hands of time back in the other way. Now, to your point, it is a tremendous opportunity for Mona, because if he does, and this is a short-term contract, he's going to look like a prize to the rest of the league.
He's got to see it as an opportunity, though.
And that's something that I think the structure of his contract, he should be motivated to do that. And he brings something different than maybe other bigs that Luka Doncic has played with. He's really efficient in the mid-range, shot 47% from 8 to 16 feet away from the basket. So he provides a little bit of something different here for Los Angeles. They need this to work. They know that this was the deficiency in their roster in a lot of ways last year. They let some different folks walk. It made some people in the organization feel a certain type of way. They need this to work. DeAndre Ayton needs this to work, and that tends to be the type of partnership that...
Starting with Mr. Dolan, to Leon, to the players, all the way down to the fans, is to build a sustainable winning culture that produces championships. That's why I'm here. I'm fortunate to know what it takes to create that success. It was a no-brainer for me. You know, the league is the league, and there's always going to be ebbs and flows in terms of how the hiring and firing process goes, and you just embrace it and you keep moving forward.
There's a reverence whenever Mike Brown speaks. Welcoming in our panel, our senior writer, Ramona Shelburne, our senior writer, Brian Windhorst, and I'm so glad we have our do-it-all analyst, Monica McNutt, here in Los Angeles as well. I'm glad we have you here today, Monica, because amongst your 50-11 jobs, one of them is spending time covering the New York Knicks. What do you think of what we just heard from Mike Brown and his fit here as the new head coach?
Well, I think that he said all the right things for sure, and I buy them as sincere, Malika. When you look at this team, these guys have great personalities. They've obviously had great success this past season. There's not a ton of tweaking that needs to be done. Yes, you mentioned it in your toss, getting over the hump, that will be on the shoulders of Mike Brown. But in terms of having an organization that is already committed to winning, that has been well established. And I think when I look at Mike Brown's resume, one of the things that jumps out, and we talked about this a bunch last week in New York, are the 2 Coach of the Year awards separated by decades, right? And so to me, it indicates that he's been able to adapt to this generation of both coaches and the style of the NBA game that has changed over time.
And he has won, maybe not as a head coach, but as an assistant coach. He's been a champion. He's been around the stars of the stars, the Steph Currys, the LeBron James. But when you're looking at a roster that is largely the same here, Ramona, and it's a huge head coaching shakeup, after the Knicks made it all the way to the conference finals, the bar of success, it's pretty freaking high.
So let's remind people, though, that when they did get rid of Tom Thibodeau, they met with a lot of the key players. There was interviews with 7 or 8 of the key players right before they made that decision. And so I think they're pretty confident knowing that Mike Brown will be well received here and a new voice will be well received. And I think probably his best attribute here is just his flexibility. You know, one of the things that happened with the Knicks, they had one of the best 2-man combinations in offense early in the season with Jalen Brunson and Karl Towns. That pick and roll game worked so well. Then opponents changed things up